Chimaev's coach spoke up, and Chimaev's coach admitted that he was frustrated with Chimaev in Chimaev's match against Burns, that he wasn't following the game plan. Now, I've heard many other people speak up and say that, and I even read an interview where George St-Pierre weighed in on it. George was saying, hey, look, you got to get disciplined. Some good things happened here. He dealt with adversity. He worked through it. He got some real minutes. He'd been going through everybody. He needed some time. However, he's got to stay more focused. Got to have a game plan. Got to stick to it. Now, I saw something different. I thought Chimaev looked awesome. And I've been in Chimaev's shoes where you get on a roll, and that's all your coach sees. You get in competitions, you get on a roll. Whatever it is you set out to do, take a guy down, get control, slow the match down, get some ground and pound, whatever it might be. But you also do that in practice. You show the coach every single day. No matter who the training partner is, what the situation, you show them that you have this ability. You have the ability to cut off the ring. You have the ability to close the distance. You have the ability to drag the guy down to the mat. You have the ability to do good work there. But what happens when you're in a situation like Chimaev? See, I don't think that Chimaev threw the game plan out. That's my thing. I don't think that Chimaev lost focus. I don't think that Chimaev got pulled into fighting a different fight than his fight. I think he was forced to do it. It's one of the reasons I enjoyed it and I appreciated Chimaev so much. What happens if your plan is to go out, hit that double, drag the guy down to the canvas, and it fails? It's a two-man sport. 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in MMA. Like, there's no perfect math. You can go out, if in this case Chimaev, and do everything right. You can measure your opponent. You can slip. You can close the distance. You can get to the hips. You can do everything right, and it doesn't work. Your opponent knows where his hips are. Your opponent knows how to turn in. He knows how to find a side whizzer. He knows how to create separation from your head and his body, which makes you very weak, which makes that technique not work. What do you do then? You can't get frustrated. You can't always just go back to it. Well, if the first technique doesn't work, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. At some point, you have to learn. He's ready for this technique. Oh, by the way, I've had 4 fights. I hit the same technique on absolutely everybody, so he had a good idea that it was coming. It turns out he's prepared for it. I got to mix it up. And that's what I saw Chimaev do. And yes, that's a dangerous way to fight, for sure. If that is the final analysis on this, I'll stand down and I'll completely agree. With the coach, with St-Pierre, with all the assessments that are coming in, I'll fully agree. Anybody that goes into a shootout, that is a long-term plan, does not generally equal an undefeated MMA record. It's just who can get to the target first, right? I mean, it's one of those things. But if you're mixing things up, if you've got, the intangibles are more important, I must tell you. Can you dig deep? Can you fight when your eye is shut? Can you fight when your nose is broke? Can you fight when you think it's going to be an easy night? It turns out to be really hard. Can you fight all 15 minutes when you thought that you were going to be out there 5 or less? Like, can you change? You were planning to drag the guy down, but you end up in your feet for 50% of the time. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. You either pass that test in the moment or you don't. When things are hotter than you thought they were going to be, generally a fighter will unravel. But I was noticing small stuff with Chimaev. I was noticing how in the moment he was. There was a point in that match where a takedown had happened and Gilbert Burns, who's a 3-time world jiu-jitsu champion, spun for an arm bar. Chimaev simply pulled his arm out of the way so his elbow was through the legs. To you at home, that probably looked very simple. I agree. But you must be extremely 100% present in that moment or Gilbert Burns is going to snatch your arm. That was a fight-ending sequence where Gilbert Burns did everything from a technical standpoint right. But he didn't get the arm. How come? Well, because Chimaev did the defense right too, right? They were both playing the same game. As much as anybody wants to say they were frustrated with the way that Chimaev fought or that Chimaev got away from his game plan, the same was true for Gilbert. It was absolute chaos. Henry Hoof and company did not tell Gilbert, go out there and make this chaotic, make this a mess, fight him absolutely everywhere. They prepared him for anything, they warmed him up appropriately, and they sent their fighter into combat. It's one of the reasons that I thought that Chimaev looked so great. It's one of the reasons that Chimaev flew up in the rankings. I don't know what he was ranked before, but all the way to number 3. Because he really was tested. And when the end of the fight came, I was noticing how much Chimaev was still bouncing around. Like, his footwork was never stagnant. He was not tired. He was not slowing down. He was not backing down. He was in a chaotic, dangerous fight. That is true. But I don't know that I agree to the premise that he was there on his own accord. I think that takes away from Gilbert. If you're making as though Chimaev had lost focus and that's why it was such an ugly fight as far as technique goes, you're taking away from Gilbert Burns. Why can't we admit that Chimaev's plan to take him down, it wasn't that he vacated it. It wasn't that he resisted or boycotted that idea. It's that it didn't work. Those takedowns just weren't there. They weren't as easy. The more times a guy stops it, the harder it gets. The sweatier a guy is, the more your heart rate gets up, the harder it is to do those things. They don't get easier as the night goes on. If your first one fails, it's not as though your second one gets more likely to happen. It gets less likely to happen. And there was some big takedowns, and there was some big scrambles, and there was some very technical moments. But for the most part, that fight was an all-out brawl. I agree. That's a dangerous game. I agree. If you can get better, if you can get more disciplined, if you can slow that down, if you're grappling heavy and you can make the grappling more of a component, that's better for the long run. I agree. I just greatly resist anybody that faults the performance of Chimaev. It was awesome. Everything was against him. Everything that he envisioned and believed to be true ended up not being. The domination that he planned on having was met with resistance. The takedowns that he thought would be there easily were met with resistance. The striking that he thought would be a plan B, no problem, was met with resistance. It turned into a fight. And so many athletes understand aggression. Aggression is the punches and the kicks and the takedowns and the chokes going one way. When they start coming back at you, that's where the fight is. And many people crumble, particularly the first time that it happens to you. The first time a match turns out to be harder than you thought it was going to be is a very negative experience, and you chalk it up to a learning lesson. Chimaev passed. The hotter it got, the more he rose to it. The uglier it got, the bloodier it got, the more painful it got, the more he rose to the occasion. I saw something very different than most people. I had a very different interpretation of Chimaev after that. I don't concede that he lost focus or that he was undisciplined. Gilbert Burns showed up ready. He stopped the first line of offense, and Chimaev had to go to the second and third. Dana White said that Chimaev was tested and he passed with flying colors. That's what I also saw. And yes, it was ugly, and yes, it was chaotic, and yes, those are dangerous fights. You put a guy in 5, 6, 7 grappling heavy fights when he's the better wrestler, be good for him. You put him in 5, 6, 7 shootouts of here I am, here you are, we're both within distance, let's throw and see who can get to the target fastest. That's dangerous. I agree, but I think that both can be right at the same time.